Welcome to Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Our guest today is Paul Teixeira. He's currently serving as chair of the Board of Supervisors in San Luis Obispo County, which often is a position of import, but it has become even more important in San Luis right now as a result of some contention going on in the public with regard to one specific supervisor and his personal life, and you've had to really kind of rein it in a bit. Talk to us about the challenges you're facing as chair in a simple public comment period.
Well, public comment in our meetings has literally got out of hand. And so
literally.
Two weeks ago, we called everybody in, said, you know what, it's not going to go on from here. This is a family show. We have young people listening. We have old people listening. We don't want these kind of comments. And if you're going to make these kind of comments, we're going to ask you to leave.
And what's most interesting about this whole kind of three-ring circus is that when we look at the underlying issue, which deals with the personal life of a supervisor, it's been vetted, it's been resolved for the most part as a result of the public side of it. And yet you have a public that keeps wanting to talk about it. They don't want to stop.
You've got
or members of the
public that want to talk about it, and from my point of view, it was a personal matter. We run 5 independent offices at the Board of Supervisors. I don't control what my colleagues do in their office as far as the relationship they have with their legislative aide or how they deal with staff or whatever. It's because of the Brown Act and other legislations, we're not allowed to do that. We're not allowed to talk to them, you know, more than a couple supervisors at a time.
Right.
So we can't have these big meetings in secret and talk about these things.
And what's interesting is you do mention the Brown Act. I don't think a lot of members of the public realize that under this state law, literally, you can only talk to one other supervisor outside of a public forum for violation of the Brown Act.
That is correct.
If you talk to a third, that's now a majority of the board.
It's considered a public meeting.
And you're in violation if it's not a public meeting.
Right.
And so it's not as if there's all this kind of backroom dealing going on. It's literally impossible.
Well, and the big thing is, if you're going to meet with more than one supervisor, it has to be noticed, it has to be agendized, and it has to be open to the public. So regardless of what you're going to talk about with more than one other colleague, it becomes a public meeting. And if you don't, then you're in violation of the Brown Act.
So do you feel as if we've turned the corner on these kind of salacious comments being made during public comment? Or is it a situation where, look, people have a First Amendment right to say what they want to say, and as long as they don't, you know, break decorum in a dramatic way, there's not much that can be done?
I would hope that we have. I mean, we're all grown-ups. All of us, you know, are there to represent the public and do the best job that we can. The comments have been made, the action's been taken. I believe the action by County Council and the CAO's office was the proper action to take. There's people that want us to go further and do an independent investigation and do all this kind of stuff. And it's basically people that have a personal vendetta with the supervisor.
Right.
And I don't think that that's a good use of public funds, and I don't think it's a good use of public time.
And as it is, I understand that the use of public funds has been increasing because of various requests for email correspondence through the Freedom of Information Act. And so it's starting to get fairly expensive.
It gets very expensive. You got staff time, and we're not talking about low-level staff. We're talking about staff in the county council's office that has to go through these emails on a one-by-one basis, make sure that there's information there that is pertinent to what they're talking about, that there's not other information or private information coming from a constituent that's there that could be used against somebody, which is that's not public.
Do this. Let's continue the conversation when we come back.
Got it.
For our viewers on HLN, we thank you for joining us. For our other viewers, we'll be right back. So Supervisor, in the final analysis though, you did mention that there are 5 different supervisors working independently for their constituents. Do you believe that despite the Brown Act and despite that you work for 5 different communities, that there still is a collegiality, a camaraderie, that you're able to get the business of the county done? Very
much so. You know, my colleagues and I work very hard to do the work of the people of the county. And I think that there's been aspersions cast by the public over what we do and how we do it, and that's not the way it's done in our office. And I talk about the whole 4th floor together. We work very collegially together. I'm not going to tell you that we work harmoniously because we have a difference of opinion on many issues.
But that's democracy.
That's it. That's it.
And that's
democracy at its finest.
It's so literally.
Yes.
But what's also interesting about the board is that as a result of an election last year, the makeup of the board changed.
Exactly.
And so arguably, and again, I'm just speaking in generalities, you now are part of a majority, whereas last year you may have been a part of a minority because of the 3-2 splits. And so do you still have the opportunity to work with those that are now in the minority? I mean, from my sense is your goal is to just get it done.
It's not so much who's in charge and what party's there. It's more about doing the work of the people and doing what's right. And what I like to look at is the fact that the 4th District, which I represent, is what I call the swing vote again. For many years, my predecessor, now Assemblyman Asajian, was the swing vote because of the makeup of the board. And now it comes back to our district to be that swing vote and do the right thing. Whether it's, to the left or the right, we will do the right thing for the people of San Luis County.
So what are the people of San Luis County saying to you? What do they want to be done? We now have a situation where, the county is an arm of the state, and the state seems to be doing better fiscally, be it because of an improving economy, Proposition 30, whatever it may be. So what are they talking to you about today?
People want to see projects done in their district. People want to see projects done in their neighborhood. One of the big projects that we've just completed is the Willow Road Interchange in my district, a huge boon to the South County. We're working on a revitalization project in Oceano, working on 13th Street and Highway 1 flooding project. This past fall, we've cleaned out the lagoon in Oceano to hope to alleviate some of the flooding down there. This is what people want to do. They want to see government in action, putting their dollars to work to better their communities and solve the problems that we have in these communities.
We've had people come on our program to talk about Oceano, and they're talking about the dunes. Is that something that's on your agenda often?
It is, and as the current president or chairman of the Air Pollution Control District, it is very much a top priority for us. We look at it, though, as a joint effort of the APCD and California State Parks. There is no fine line between them. They are working together, and they will continue to work together to solve that problem to the best of our ability.
But this is an example where there are different groups really coming at it differently. I mean, sometimes there's a place for compromise, and sometimes the groups are so polarized on this issue. Are you finding there's some compromise that can be done?
Well, I think that there needs to be a general understanding that regardless if there's vehicle activity on the beach or not, you're going to have sand blowing off the beach.
Of course, we know that.
And that's the thing that people need to realize. I don't know if we take the vehicles off the beach, which I'm not for, if it will solve the problem. Or can we put up a barrier to alleviate the sand blowing off the beach that's going to help with that problem? But either way, and I mean, you can go to Avila, you can go farther down the beach where the vehicles don't travel, and you've got sand blowing off the beach.
Right, that's also the issue. It's almost as if we have a mini climate change debate right here in San Luis County. I mean, I think, on climate change, maybe there's consensus that we do have this issue percolating, but on the Oceano Dunes issue, I mean, some believe that sand will blow off regardless, and some say that it's all the vehicle's fault.
Well, and a really good example of this, Brad, is 4 or 5 months ago, maybe not that long, we had a control burn at Diablo Canyon.
Right.
Okay, everything was set up perfectly. The wind was going to blow the smoke off the beach, off the air out into the ocean, and it was going to be perfect. Well, the prevailing winds caught it and brought it right back into the area where we've got the sand problem. Right. So, I mean, if it's going to do that, it kind of gives you an example of the problems we have with the sand.
I hear you. His name is Paul Teixeira. He is the chair of the San Luis Obispo County Board of Supervisors. My name is Brad Pomerance. This is California Edition. Charter California edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Our guest, Chris Ungar, he is a trustee on the San Luis Coastal Unified School District. Sir, thank you for joining us. Gotta say, I was a little surprised to learn that San Luis Coastal is planning to cut up to 29 positions,
Right.
even though Proposition 30 passed, which I thought provided new money or stabilized funding for all school districts.
Well, I think what it did was it stabilized funding. It didn't really provide any new funding, but what it did was it prevented things from getting much worse. Had it not passed, I think every school district in California would have faced about $437 worth of ADA cuts per student.
As I understand it, the governor has proposed new money,
Correct.
aside from Prop 30, which increases the ADA by about $300 per student. Is that accurate? Or is the jury still out on what's going to happen?
I think the jury's still out on that. The governor has proposed a new funding system for schools.
Right, the local control funding formula.
The local control funding formula.
Which presumably would not go well for San Luis Coastal, a basic aid district.
It would not go well for us. What it would do is it would put us in essentially a hold harmless. It would put a lot of school districts in a hold, what I would consider as a hold harmless. So they would look at the money that we're getting now and they would say, given the other factors that would be part of that formula, this is where you are now and this is where you would be. When he presented it last year, one of the problems with it was that there were going to be real winners and losers. Now what he's saying is, I'm going to make everybody harmless, but some districts are going to get a lot more than others.
And those districts are those that educate English language learners and educate economically disadvantaged.
Correct.
Now, you do have some economically disadvantaged, but overall, you're a wealthier district.
We are a wealthier district in some ways. We have well over 30% of our students as what we consider economically disadvantaged. Basically, it's whether you look at free and reduced lunch.
But you need to get to 50%
well,
on
to get the additional bump. So what the governor's proposing is he's proposing money for individual students.
Right.
Then if the percentage of your students is higher than a figure, then you get an additional bump. So we have some districts in San Luis Obispo County that don't have a lot of money coming in right now. Some of the more rural districts that have extreme poverty amongst their students and high levels of English language learning. And they're going to be the real winners. Their kids are going to be the real winners.
So what do you say to the soccer moms?
What do I say to soccer moms about why it's going to look so different? Well,
San Luis Coastal is going to be the loser in this.
We're losing because we're a basic aid community funded school district. And so what had happened to us, we did some smart things, I think. The first thing we did is we really created a reserve because we knew that at any time the state could cut our tax funds.
So here's what's confusing though.
Sure,
let me say this.
Yeah, of course.
So you're a wealthier district, you're a basic aid district, Prop 30 passes, we're paying more taxes, and yet you're laying off 29 positions.
Okay, and this is exactly where I'm going with this. So what happened was, when everybody else suffered in California, all the what we call revenue limit school districts suffered in California, basic aid school districts had to pay what's called their fair share of pain. Our fair share of pain is about $4.5 million a year. So we've been supplementing programs out of our reserves for this $4.5 million, thinking all along that we'd get that repaid, and it wasn't.
Okay, well, when we come back, I want to talk about sequestration and how sequestration is impacting school districts around the state. For our viewers on HLN, thank you for joining us. For our other viewers, we'll be right back. So Chris Ungar, we know that the federal government is engaged in fits and starts on deficit reduction as a result of a plan that went into place a year and a half ago and was not revised. There are, I'll just use the word draconian cuts, $85 billion, and they are impacting every level of government, even as far down as local school districts.
Absolutely.
And San Luis Coastal is an example of any school district in the state of California.
Yes, we are. I think the first thing that people should know about is the sequestration pain for California is about $262 million. And
That's schools only.
That's schools only, and just schools in California. There are several areas that it's going to affect because there are several places where we're really helped by federal money. The first is Title I funding. Now, Title I is funding that's targeted toward kids that are economically disadvantaged. In California,
how ironic, given our prior discussion, how Governor
exactly.
Brown is looking to increase funding
right.
to school districts that are economically disadvantaged.
Right, and so California-wide, we're talking about $91 million in losses from Title I, and that's money that is absolutely going to affect kids in poverty.
And you specialize yourself in your professional life on helping students with disabilities.
Yep.
And your program has a big target on its back.
Yes, it does. We expect special education to be down about $72 million in California. Now, that really, of course, it really hurts kids, but it really bothers the special educators because when the law was enacted, when IDEA was enacted, the federal government's promise to us was that they would pay 40% of the cost of special education. They're paying about 16 or 17% right now, and so we'll get even less. So what that means, Brad, is this is money that needs to be paid because these are children that need educations. And so because we absolutely have a responsibility to educate them, that money will come from our general funds, which means, unfortunately,
more layoffs?
Could be more layoffs, could mean less money available for other things.
What about
because
Head Start?
we call it encroachment. Head Start is absolutely going to be affected. They say about 8,200 students, 8,200 preschoolers in California. And again, this is targeting those kids that really, really need preschool. A couple of others that I think are really interesting. Career Technical in California, down about $7 million. That's a big deal in California.
And we know on the community college side, those programs are being cut as it stands.
Right.
And so when you have high schools cutting Career and Technical, you have community colleges cutting Career and Technical, where do we go from here? I mean, not everyone can be a college graduate.
No.
We need people at all levels of the economic food chain.
Right. I was fortunate enough last week to go to a presentation at Morro Bay High School where the teacher had actually guided the students through creating a room in a house with plumbing, wiring, all that kind of stuff. What you hear from contractors is, we're getting kids out of high school that aren't ready to work. So how do we get kids ready? You can't call India and have a carpenter come out.
Right. So what's the answer? I mean, the hue and cry from school districts is being heard loud and clear. I mean, school districts feel as if they dodged a bullet with the passage of Prop 30, with the state being in the black apparently right now. And now we have the federal government with its dysfunction on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., causing more pain.
Right.
When we're just getting over 5 years of pain.
Well, I think from a federal level, one of the things that we'd like to see is them getting together and coming up with a solid plan that's not going to penalize people, especially schools. I mean, everybody, but schools and poor people.
But
and
the parties are so far apart. I mean, the Republican Party has said very clearly they will not close tax loopholes to help the sequester. They will not vote for increased revenues, whatever it is.
And
so where do we go?
Well, then I think we need to look locally. And if you look at a bill, I think it's called SB 3 in California, it would be something to put an amendment or a ballot proposition on to lower the parcel tax, for example, to 55%, which would be local funding that would be designated for certain things.
Right, because right now you can pass a school bond at 55%, but that's for projects.
That's only for projects.
You can't use that money for salaries. And at San Luis Coastal, for example, 92% of your budget is salary. So do you think that initiative will move forward to lower the threshold to 55%?
You know, I think that given the makeup of the legislature in California today, yes, we're going to see that move through. Now, hopefully the voters will approve that. And if they do, then we're going to have more local control. And I think local control is a good thing. And in fact, that's what the governor's talking about.
Okay, his name is Chris Ungar. He is a member of the school board at San Luis Coastal. My name is Brad Pomerance. This is California Edition. Welcome to Charter California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. We are joined by two young men, if I may say, from San Luis Obispo County, and they are part of the Latino Outreach Council. We're going to speak about a forum specific to San Luis, but also talk much more generally about issues facing Latinos and non-citizens. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. This is Matt Guerrero. This is Gregg. And I look at you, Kevin, probably not Latino. Not that you can't be part of the council, but probably not Latino.
It is true. I am not Latino. I am a mutt from Scottish and Eastern European descent.
Right.
But that's kind of the point, is that the Latino Outreach Council isn't just about involving Latinos. It's about getting Latinos involved in the San Luis Obispo County, in activities in the county, and reaching out to Latinos.
Right. And Matt, you happen to be, I guess, one half Latino, not that it matters,
Correct.
but from the other side it's British and
Yes.
probably daughters of the American Revolution or whatever it may be, or sons as it is. So why did you decide to get involved in this? You're both attorneys, public defender, immigration lawyer. Why did you decide to get involved?
The Latino Outreach Council is a good opportunity to, like Kevin said, get people involved at all stages of the county, city, local government, social services. And so there's actually a large group of people who I'd worked with through other community events that were doing this. And they brought me in, and it's a very worthwhile organization.
And the chair of this committee is Paul Teixeira, Supervisor Paul Teixeira. He is of Portuguese descent. You know, query, is that Latino? I don't know. I mean, who's the first Latino justice on the U.S. Supreme Court?
That would be Sonia Sotomayor.
Or Benjamin Cardozo?
Well, I guess there's a debate about
who
that.
descends from Portuguese
right.
Jews?
And I guess with the inclusive nature, I should probably be a little bit more.
We're going to say,
about
but
it.
we digress. I used to be a lawyer, as you may know, so be that as it may. So let's talk about the forum coming up specific to San Luis, and then I want to talk more generally. Tell us about the forum on immigration coming up March 27th.
At 6:30 p.m. at the Board of Supervisors chambers. There will be a meet and greet ahead of time, and then there's going to be a forum, a panel discussion for people to talk about immigration issues, and hopefully have a free, open discussion that's an honest discussion and not a cheerleading session or a railroad session.
Which is so interesting that you say that, because you look at the issue of immigration today, and I think it's fair to say that as a result of the results of November's election, the conversation has changed quite dramatically. Is that a fair assessment, Kevin?
I think that's a very fair assessment, and I think there's a lot of expectation at this point that something will be passed. But I think what we find in that type of situation is that there's a lot of misinformation, some of it malicious, some of it just because of the nature, the complicated nature of immigration law. It's hard to fit everything into a 30-second or 1-minute news piece. So there's a lot of misinformation,
Right.
a lot of optimism.
Well, let's talk about one area where it should be fairly clear that there is a path to legality, and that focuses on what we know as DREAM Act kids. What do you tell us about the DREAM Act kid? You represent several.
Sure, I've represented a number of DREAM Act kids, and you know, they are great kids.
What is a DREAM Act kid? Because that's an example of getting the information out.
Sure, so the DREAM Act is still a law that hasn't been passed. What happened last year is deferred action went into place, which is a way for Dreamers to have a temporary legal status and permission to work. We're talking about children who arrived when they were under 16 years old,
Right.
who graduated from high school, who have stayed out of trouble. This gives them a temporary path, and that's been a powerful thing to see, because I've seen a lot of people give up on their dreams who are now pursuing them again.
It's interesting. We've learned that many, quote, dreamer kids, they didn't even know they weren't born in the country. I mean, some of them came at such a young age, they didn't know. And so they try to get a job, try to get financial aid, and they can't do it.
Well, they're culturally American.
Right. And where would you send them? They may not speak the language of their home country.
That's exactly correct.
When we come back, I want to continue the conversation about immigration, get your sense of where we're going. For our viewers on HLN, we thank you for joining us. For our other viewers, we'll be right back. So Matt, what do you do with these young individuals, for example, may not even realize that they are not citizens? How do you talk to them about their, I guess the word is plight?
Well, I've met them in a couple of scenarios. One is when civil litigation, one is criminal litigation.
Right.
And mostly it's with somebody who runs afoul of the laws. They're 20 years old, they've gone and gotten a job, they thought that they were legal, they've been using identification that their parents gave them when they were 15, 16 years old, and then they or their employers get cited by the police or the authorities
Right.
for false identification, false information, perjury, for filling out forms trying to work.
Right, and they may not realize. But what's interesting is it's not just an individual issue. It's not a person-by-person issue. Corporations are now involved in this immigration question, because in the final analysis, there are certain industries, and we're on the Central Coast today, that need, I'll call it, immigrant labor. And so what are you seeing on your side of the business?
Well, it's interesting being in this area because we do see a more practical approach from a lot of the employers. There's an understanding that there's an attachment, a relationship between workers that might not have authorization to work and especially the agricultural community, but other communities as well. So there's a more openness in the community. Because of that, there's also more assimilation, I think. Because there's a respect and understanding of the work that the workers are performing. But at the same time,
you reside in what we call North San Luis Obispo County, and I think it's fair to say that that area is known for its more conservative politics. You're from more Central South County, which is a little more liberal, I think, if I can use those overused cliches.
Fair to say. Yeah.
And so what are you saying in terms of the immigration debate?
Well, even though it tends to be a more conservative county, I find that the employers themselves are not as conservative on the immigration issue. Something else that I've been hearing a lot from the employers, whether it be in the wine industry or other ag areas, is we don't have enough labor. Especially when we're talking about the Dreamers. Those kids are not getting involved in agriculture. Their parents might be involved in it, but second generation, third generation don't want to stay in that field. So there is a shortage of labor, whether it be during harvest when there's a high demand for it. And I think because of that, there's an understanding among the agricultural employers that there's some type of a need for a compromise.
But are they letting their representatives know? Because in the final analysis, I mean, this is not a sequestration issue where the parties are firmly entrenched. There does seem to be the ability for some level of compromise. I mean, I know this county is represented by Lois Capps, a Democrat, so we know where she comes down, but still, if neighboring Republican members, for example, could hear from business interests, it really could hold sway.
When you see, it's one area that doesn't seem to be controversial in the immigration debate nationally. When you see conservative politicians nationally, they do seem to come out for some type of an agricultural or labor visa, whether it be temporary in nature or not. That's one of the non-controversial areas. So I think that whether it be locally or nationally, that agricultural industries are reaching out.
And what about your clients, for example? You're a public defender. I mean, if there's a criminal conviction, even if it's a low-level plea bargain, that can prevent them from getting citizenship. It could also lead to deportation.
That's correct. And the Supreme Court has required that we advise them of the immigration consequences of each particular plea. Oftentimes we'll carry a chart that'll say these are deportable offenses, these are non-deportable offenses, and we have to advise them. It's always in writing in all of our files.
And at this stage, though, I mean, we know the Obama administration is not looking to deport for these low-level offenses, even if they are even if they are deportable.
Some lip service, maybe.
It is a lot of lip service, yes. Right. Publicity-wise, they are saying that they are not deporting, and in some cases, if there's a lot of equities, children, medical issues, they are honoring that. But generally, that's kind of the hidden secret behind all this. There have been more people deported in the past 5 years than there were pretty much in the history of the U.S. before.
Well, I mean,
President
we
Obama's
know
term.
that President Obama's administration deported more people in the first term, first term, than President Bush did in 2 terms.
Correct.
So where do we go from here?
Well, it's difficult, and one of the things that you work with is you'll work with a parent who's being deported, and I will talk to them and say, well, what do you have? What are your community contacts? And you'll find out they have 3 children and a wife.
Right.
And dealing with those particular issues, we're talking to clients who are here and their family is in Mexico, and maybe they're going to be locked up or sent back to Mexico. Right. You ask them, why do you come? And they will tell you, well, at home,
better life.
At home, I could make $7 a day if I could find work. And this still is, America still is the bright shining light.
Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. We have been speaking with Kevin, Gregg, Matt Guerrero, part of the Latino Outreach Council in San Luis County. I'm Brad Pomerance. This is California Edition.